Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara May, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome to our latest episode of Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May, and today I have with me Neil Cannon. He is a best-selling author and wellness coach currently living in Mexico. He long suffered from debilitating eczema, receiving only symptom-masking treatments before stumbling upon his own cure. By applying himself to his pillars of vitality, he was able to reverse his condition and discover that those pillars could be applied to virtually any common and chronic illness with extraordinary results. His mission is to keep helping people reverse engineer their symptoms and illnesses and balance their bodies across with his book and his digital program, The Inflammation Solution. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
Thanks. I love to get started with my guests by having them just tell us a little bit about your story, your evolution, how you came to be teaching what you're teaching.
Yes, I love this question. And as I'm sure you're aware, everyone I know who works in the holistic space has their own story of healing or recovery, or knows someone close to them who has inspired them to go on this journey. So I come with my own story, just like you mentioned earlier with the eczema. I had that from a very young age, from a toddler. And I was always given these treatments that meant it would always come back. It was always symptom masking. So I was given these steroid creams, which have left pigmentation on my skin. Well, you can see, but I know this is an audio version, but there's pigmentation on my skin that you could possibly see. Prescription moisturizers, which really contain these nasty, toxic ingredients, and also antibiotics when it got really bad, which, whilst there might be a necessity sometimes, if they're used too much, they really harm the gut microbiome, which is the one organ that you want to heal with any kind of skin condition or anything, in fact. So it wasn't until my father suffered a stroke when I had my own wake-up call. In a weird roundabout way, he was my wake-up call. So prior to his stroke, I remember him being told he had chronic inflammation. The reason I know that is because his sister is a naturopathic doctor and my aunt. And I remember him telling me in the family home, in the kitchen, I remember exactly where we were standing. He said, I've got this thing called chronic inflammation. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is. And then a few years later, he had a stroke. So I had this inner knowing, this kind of innate intelligence telling me that his stroke was avoidable. I didn't know where it was coming from, other than seeing this word inflammation in books I was reading by that point, already being in health and fitness. But I just had this conviction that his stroke was avoidable. And I went about kind of researching this thing called chronic inflammation to see what it really is and why wasn't he given the advice by his doctor to eradicate it? Because it didn't seem to me to be something very difficult to actually get rid of. So long story short, I read quite a few books, documentaries, watched lots of interviews, and very, very quickly it became apparent to me that chronic inflammation is the underlying cause of almost every chronic illness that exists. The reason for the inflammation varies from person to person. But ultimately, the actual underlying condition is chronic inflammation. So depending on your genetic code, that's going to reflect, in my case, eczema, someone else asthma, for someone else diabetes, for someone else arthritis. It's that kind of basic, if you will. I'm kind of saying it's basic. It's not obviously completely basic to reverse it, but understanding this doesn't need to be complicated. And what I realized was I could get rid of my own eczema. So the underlying cause of his stroke, the high blood pressure that led to his stroke, the underlying cause of his asthma he'd had since 12, which is a fully reversible condition, contrary to popular belief, That's when I discovered that it's the underlying cause of my eczema. So I was like, how do I get rid of eczema? Oh, I need to firstly start with an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's what I did. Changed my lifestyle, changed my habits, really got present and aware of the thoughts and emotions I was experiencing, which play a huge impact on the health of our cells. So yeah, very, very quickly I eradicated my eczema. I can't use the word cure, because if for whatever reason my body becomes toxic, it can come back. You know, if I were to consume some things that aren't meant to be consumed, there might be a reaction, and therefore the eczema might come back. But I don't. In the bio you read out, I just wanted to make that point, because cure needs to be a word one needs to be mindful about using the word cure, because it suggests that it never comes back. So eczema is a symptom, just like any other name of illness. It's a symptom. So if my body is under, more stress than usual, or like I said, I've got some kind of toxin in the body, or I'm exposed to a toxin, it can come back. For the most part, it's gone. And I don't really consider myself as someone who suffers from eczema. So yeah, since 2015, I've been helping people reverse all kinds of chronic inflammatory health conditions by using the same principles. And that's the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic pillars of vitality.
Fantastic. So I love what you said about the word cure. I feel like that word cure is definitely a Western medicine construct, that even though we're in the holistic healing space, we've brought that in with its expectation of complete eradication. And while something can be reversed, like you said, if you go back to living and doing and being the way you were prior, then it stands to reason, and also the word you use, because of your epigenetics and your genetic makeup, then it most likely will come back. So let's talk a little bit. I've had epigenetic specialists on my show before. I love the topic. Let's talk a little bit about that from your perspective. How do you integrate that into your treatment approach?
Yes. So with everything I do, I just like to simplify everything. So epigenetics, in its simplest term, is really talking about the environment that we keep in our bodies. And epi means above, and genetics is below. So epi is above the genes. Epi means the environment. Genes is what they are controlling. Genes are like the hardware. Epigenetics is like the software. So epigenetics is the environment that we keep in the body. So it's not the genes that trigger the illness. We often think that we have a genetic disease, or we have a genetic tendency because our parents had X, Y, or Z, or Z in your country. So I think it's a very freeing thing to know that our genes aren't our destiny. Even if both of my parents have had serious illnesses, but there's no reason why I need to follow suit. We can come from a family of cancer, or a family of diabetes, or a family of whatever, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It doesn't mean that you're going to get that necessarily. What it means is that there's a potential somewhere in the field for that to happen. But if we can have an environment in the body conducive to healing, and which isn't toxic and which isn't inflammatory, there's no reason why we have to follow our parents' footsteps. So that is really empowering in my view. And this is true for more than 95% of the population, apparently. And around 4 to 5, in fact, some people say it's even less. Some pioneers I'm very, very closely following, like Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I call the father of epigenetics, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm going to his advanced retreat next week again. Some people are born with what are so-called defective genes, or genes that are fully penetrant. I'm doing air quotes. Fully penetrant means that we don't have the power necessarily to override our gene expression in less than 5% of the population, i.e. they're defective. But that's also not to say that even if one is born with a defective gene, that one can't reverse that illness. It just means that they didn't have much power as to whether or not that was expressed. So for the most part of the population, more than 95% of the population, that puts us back into the driving seat. That gives us power. So we can say, okay, it's the environment in my body that signals the health of my cells. It's not my genes. So what can I do for my environment so I can signal new genes in new ways?
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned already is eating in an anti-inflammatory fashion. And so when we think about environment, oftentimes we think about like what's in the room around us, what's outside the room in the building that we're in. But really our environment is our thoughts. Our environment is, you know, what we're putting into our body, what we're exposed to every day, our stress level, you know, and all of those things. So absolutely.
100%. All of those things.
So you mentioned an anti-inflammatory diet. What does that look like for you and your protocols?
So for diet, I always talk about going back to the nature codes. You know, nature makes no mistakes. Man makes mistakes. Man combined with weird thinking, let's just say, and money creates weird and dodgy mistakes. Nature doesn't make any mistakes. So if we get back to nature, we can heal ourselves, really. That is one of my ultimate, I was going to say beliefs. It's a knowing, it's an absolute knowing that when we get back to nature, we can heal ourselves. So a lot of people are eating, and this was my case for the most part of 30 years, eating an inflammatory diet. An inflammatory diet. So for breakfast, I was eating a bowl of inflammation. I was having breakfast cereal with milk. That's not a good combination for anyone who has eczema or any other kind of chronic inflammatory health condition. So one of the first things I did was I took out gluten and I took out dairy, and that had an effect almost immediately. And that has an effect on a lot of people. I can't say 100% of people. Some people, you know, everybody is different, but there are some things that work across the board. Other things that work across the board are just going clean. So really being mindful about what is fake. Are we eating any fake food? Are there any artificial flavorings and preservatives and chemicals? Are there ingredients on the ingredients label that you can't even pronounce? You know, what am I drinking? Am I eating fried food? Is what I'm eating not in alignment with nature, basically? If it's been tampered with, if it's GMOs are really bad news. I can't say across the board, but there's some things which are really bad news, like GMO corn, GMO soy, GMO cottonseed. They're really bad news. And the testing that got them approved, this is interestingly similar to what's going on currently. The testing that got them approved was 3 months when Monsanto had their various products approved. 3 months isn't a long enough incubation period for anything to be tested. So more conscious, intelligent people tested their grains for a longer period of time, for 24 months, and for 12 months, 24 months. Within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 20 months onwards, they were getting all kinds of tumors. These rats and mice were getting tumors all over their bodies. And this is just a demonstrative example of what happens if we mess with nature. So GMOs are a good idea not to include in one's diet. So if I'm in America, for example, I'm more strict than I am in England, or more strict than I am if I'm in Italy or France, because in America, the grain has been messed with. The wheat grain has been messed with. It's gone through a process called it's hybridization, but it's actually called mutagenesis. So they have interfered with the proteins in the wheat grain. And whilst what they have created is brilliant for the agricultural industry, because it means they can yield more in less time. Crops used to be about 1.5 meters tall, and now they're dwarf crops, are about a foot tall. So it's good for the money, it's good for the agriculture, it's not good for our guts. And then it's Roundup Ready, like to add insult onto injury. It's been completely tampered with. So a lot of people, excuse me, in America, I'd say the majority of the population could benefit from taking out wheat unless it's a true ancient grain. So some people can go to Italy, for example, or France, and they can have wheat and they don't get affected as much or knowingly. And just anecdotally, I've got friends and people in my network who can relate to this. They'll go to Italy, they'll be fine. They'll go to America, they get bloated and they start having pains in their joints. And it's just one change in what they're eating. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Just a few examples of what can cause inflammation. Yeah.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with IBS when I was 23. Officially, I had been having issues my whole life that I just thought were normal, which definitely weren't normal. And now, so one of the things that I did too is first was gluten, then was dairy elimination. And exactly like when I go to Italy, I can have a little bit of pasta. And the more I heal my gut, the more, you know, I can have when I'm in a different country that has good agricultural systems. But I'll also say, at least in the US, I know there is a resurgence of local farmers that are using heritage breed seeds. And so they're not the Monsanto. So if you're lucky enough to be in America and you live near a farm that you know produces these products, definitely support those local farmers because they are doing this with intention. They want to have a healthy agricultural system that's good for their families, that's good for the communities. So there's definitely, and that, you know, extends also to meat products. I have friends and family both that will breed like heritage breed pigs and heritage breed turkeys. And so, and they, you know, raise them in a beautiful, healthy environment with no antibiotics and no hormones and any of that stuff. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that you just said that because it's easy to just blanket. Yeah, it is available. One just has to look for it. Yeah. I almost blanketed the whole of America then, but of course there's still conscious farmers out there.
I mean, and people doing a great job. And like the whole of, you know, big, I call it big ag, like big pharma, big food, big ag. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that's one of the reasons I love doing this show and inviting guests on like yourself that are experts, because it's important for people to know and to understand and to, you know, like, let's pull back the wool and really see the truth. And so, because so many of us, our countries, and let's get out there and support them, because the more we support them, the more they'll be able to sustain themselves and grow. And maybe I'm, you know, being a little sunshiny here is that we can start to reverse the tide. Maybe it's a little too optimistic, but
well, you know, we've got to have hope, right? And there's a few documentaries that could really help raise awareness of this. One is GMO OMG, and the other one is Farmageddon. I mean, there's many, but I just recommend those two right now.
Yeah,
you could really get an insight as to what's happening in the industry. It will blow, if this is new to listeners, it will blow your minds what happens in the agricultural industry, how these farmers are being treated by big agriculture, as you're calling it.
Yeah. And I'll even say, like, you know, maybe even defend some of these farmers too. I think they're bullied and pressured a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Especially even like in their crop choices, you know, if sometimes in order for them to survive, they have to take subsidies from the government. And when you do that, you are being told what to grow and how to grow it. And so unfortunately, they're forced with these decisions that take their autonomy away. And that's really unfortunate that even our government, who should have some pretty good scientists working for them, you know, because the way that this farming happens is not sustainable or good for the earth either. And so it's just ironic to me.
Yeah, the whole thing's ironic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the word science, I'm very mindful about that word right now. A lot of what the mainstream believes, I have to say this in a more delicate way, a lot of what is presented to us as science is really science spelt with a dollar sign.
Yes, absolutely.
It's propaganda, it's agenda. And like you say, there's bullying that happens with the farmers, bribery, and this happens in the pharmaceutical industry as well, in various industries. Initially, it's shocking, but once you find out, it's freeing. There's a saying that says the truth will piss you off. Sorry. First, the truth will piss you off, but then it will set you free, or something to that effect. I think it's
Okay. I was like, I thought it would set you free.
Yeah.
I could definitely agree that it pisses me off too, though.
The truth shall set you free, but first it will piss you off. That's right. That's right.
Excellent.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. All right. So how can we reverse engineer our chronic illness? I feel like we've started down that path a little with involving what you call the nature codes into our food. What else do we need to know or do to reverse engineer our chronic illnesses?
Yeah, great question. So I touched on, or you touched on, the 4 pillars, what I call the 4 pillars of vitality. So physical, mental, emotional, energetic. At the beginning, most people start with diet. It's just the easiest way to get results quickly. I would never say diet is the cause, the root cause of illness. What I would say, it's like a catalyst. So if the gut is weakened for whatever reason, food can help so much to rebalance the gut and get rid of symptoms. Many people can get results simply by going to an anti-inflammatory diet. However, I now understand, I would never have said this 7 years ago. I put diet at the lower end of the hierarchy, if you like. I call it the hierarchy of healing. So physical is absolutely essential to address it is essential to address. So you've got the diet, you've got the exercise, you've got to look at what toxins might be in your environment, external to you and internal to you. So external, your house could be on a chemical plant or next to a chemical plant. You might be next to an electricity generator, or you might be next to a cell phone tower, or there could be some fumes. You could be in a very, very toxic city, for example. So there could be environmental toxins affecting your body. That's the external. Internal, there could be internal toxins. There could be parasites. There could be fungi. There could be infections. There could be a big one, which I always address early on, is the mouth, because our teeth play an imperative function in the health of our body, because we are electrical beings, and every one of our organs are on different electrical meridian circuits, and these electrical circuits go through our teeth. The electrical circuits go through our teeth, and our teeth act like circuit breakers. So if you can imagine, in your home, you've got that fuse board, the consumer unit, we call it in the UK. I used to be an electrician, so when I discovered this, it was like boom, 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 got it all now. So everything was just became so clear to me in one 45-minute presentation when I discovered the body electric. There's another story about how I discovered this, but think of your house, how it's wired up with different rooms on different circuits. It's similar in the body. With different, in the house, maybe an oven, in the kitchen you got oven, fridge, and different appliances on different circuits. In the body, we have different organs on different circuits, and each of those circuits go through our teeth, and again, our teeth are like circuit breakers. So when I discovered this, I got sick for a month. I had something very mild. It was a cold I couldn't shake off, but it was annoying, and I was living in LA, and I had plenty of sunlight. It's essential for our health, and I was doing yoga almost every day. I was working out. I was fit. I was eating an anti-inflammatory diet. I was vegetable juicing every single day. I was thinking, why can't I shake off this cold? This is annoying. And I went to a kinesiologist, and he tested me, and very, very quickly he said, he pointed to my face, and he said, these 3 teeth on the right-hand side of my face, which is where I used to hold my cell phone, were quote unquote depolarized. And I had no idea what that meant. So he told me then that we're electrical beings, and all of our circuitry goes through our teeth, and our teeth act like circuit breakers. And when something is depolarized, it means the polarity is flipped. So imagine a battery, you've got positive and negative one end. You flip that upside down. That's not going to be good for the circuitry. That's what happens in the body. So my teeth, where I held my cell phone, 3 teeth had become, quote unquote, depolarized. And he said that's affecting my immune system. So the treatment was lasers. He shined lasers on my teeth, and my immune system got to action, cleared up my cold in days. It was remarkable. So then I just started thinking, this is just cool. You know, if we can understand the role of our teeth in our body and think of us as electrical beings and electrical circuits, we can literally reverse engineer, as you do an electrical system in a house. If a light starts flickering in a house, my job as an electrician would be, okay, figure out why that light is flickering. Why is there not enough power going to that light? We know from a body electric standpoint that a characteristic of all chronic illness is low voltage to an organ. In other words, in layman's terms, not enough power going to an organ, the organ in question of the dis-ease. So why is there not enough power going to the pancreas in the case of type 1 diabetes? Why is there not enough power going to the gut? Why is there not enough power going to the lung? Whatever it is. And in a house, you'd say, okay, there's not enough power going to that light. Why is that light flickering? Oh, we have a dodgy light switch. Let's replace the light switch. Or the wire's corroded. Let's replace the wire. In the body, we've got to think about what is dropping the voltage in our circuits. And there's a number of things that do that. One of the main things is toxins. It literally drops the voltage in the body, and insufficient cell fuels. And there's another one, which is probably the biggest of all of them, which is trapped emotions. So trauma, aka trapped emotions. The word trauma tends to kind of, trigger something in some people because they don't like to think of the things that have caused them trauma in the past. Think of it as energy that gets trapped, and you don't have to go and relive an event. Think of it as just energy. If we can release that energy, because if we have an experience in our lives which jolts us, it takes us out of alignment. It takes us out from being in a place of peace and calm and love and care. It jolts us. That can leave an energetic imprint in the body, and they can get stored anywhere in the body. So with a little testing, with a little reverse engineering, one can find out where the emotions are stored, which organs they're stored in. There's a slogan that says, the organs weep the tears the eyes refuse to shed. We need to get the emotions out of the organs so the voltage can rise again, so there's more power going to the organs in question. So that's a big piece of reverse engineering. I've just spoken for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So I agree. And it's funny, I use some of these same approaches and perspectives with my clients as well. But and it's funny, I've heard about the body electric before, but I have never really explored it. So
can I make a recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, my next book, which is the Vitality Code. But there's a brilliant, I just like to share information. If it's gonna change your world, I just like to pay it forward. There's a brilliant presentation on YouTube called Healing is Voltage. It's 45 minutes long. The guy, the doctor, is called Dr. Jerry Tennant. And the moment he started talking, even though it might be a little over one's head, depending on your learning style, like some of my friends just didn't get it at all, which is totally cool because we all have different learning styles and different strengths or whatever. The moment he started speaking, it resonated with me. It was like, boom, bombshell. Everything he was saying really resonated. And I do share that with all of my clients early on in the training or in the coaching, because it can change everything. It simplifies everything.
Yeah.
And
And I think just even the concept of like that we hold our experiences, our emotions, yes, trauma, and there's big T and little t trauma.
yeah,
So like even something as mild as, like maybe you had a fight with your sibling when you were really young, but if that
I said, yeah,
left a lasting impression on you, it could,
totally.
like, so you store that and you store it in different places of your body, and we're all different. And like you said earlier, it's the epigenetics that will trigger the way something presents itself, an imbalance and inflammation. So like for you, it was eczema. For me, it was IBS. For other people, it could be asthma, or, use that example too. So this is also, it's all linked up. And this is what I love about your system, your pillars of vitality, is that it illustrates that connection. And so like where we're storing this stuff is usually where our inflammation is presenting itself, and it's coming up so that it can be cleared. All we have to do is listen and take some action, I think.
Totally. At 100%. I laughed earlier when you said an argument with your sister or your sibling, because I use exactly the same analogy.
Oh, that's funny.
It can be that, we think of that as small, little t, as you say. I literally, yesterday, I used the same example when I was being interviewed. I said you might have had an argument with a sibling when you were 5 years old, and it's left some energetic imprint in your body, or a parent, often slightly bigger t. But it's just understanding that we do store this memory. The body is like an intelligence, it's its own memory bank. And with a little kinesiology, which is phenomenally powerful, a good kinesiologist, like everything, there's good ones, there's not so good ones. There's good doctors, not so good doctors. There's good oncologists, not so good oncologists. Find a good one. Some people say to me, "Oh, I tried this, it didn't work." And I said, "Well, that was one example. Let's try another one," or try me, and let's see what happens. Some of the best healing practitioners I know in the world use kinesiology to get to the cause.
Right. And for my listeners out there, that's also called muscle testing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and there's a brilliant book on this, by the way. If it sounds woo-woo, there's a brilliant book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins. And the whole first section of the book is talking about the scientific studies of kinesiology.
Yes.
So it helps to kind of establish more confidence in it. So one can go, oh, okay, that makes sense. The body goes strong on a yes, weak on a no. So if you can ask the body yes and no questions on anything, you can get an answer. The body is its own intelligence. That might be kind of weird and hard to get your head around, because we think of our heads as being our intelligence. We actually have our head intelligence, we have our heart intelligence, we have a gut intelligence, and we have intelligence in the whole body.
Yeah.
And it's across every cell. So they have done these studies that the muscles will be stronger by a certain percentage on a yes and weaker on a no. So a good one can help people get to the cause of their illness. And many people I've interviewed on my own podcast recently tell me that they use that process. So it can save years worth of suffering. Years. It's just everything has a cause. Every illness, and you alluded to it earlier, we both talked about it, it's a symptom. Every illness is a symptom. It's like a warning light. That's what you alluded to earlier, I just remembered. So it's like, if we don't listen, if we don't go, right, what's this symptom telling us, we're missing the point of the warning light. So in a car, the oil light might come on, and if we just ignore it, what's going to happen to the engine? It's going to get worse and worse and worse. If we take the car to an electrician, so they rewire the oil light, maybe not such a good example. Let's just stick with it. If they just rewire the oil light instead of changing the oil, it's going to miss the point of the oil light coming on. We have to go to the mechanic to get to the cause, to change the oil, to do what needs doing, so that that oil light goes off as it's meant to, not just masking it, not just turning it off, at the surface level.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
how I use. So the warning lights in the body, listen to them, and then if you just ask the body, what's behind this? What's behind this warning light?
Yeah. And I just want to go back a little bit too, just to reinforce for all of you fantastic listeners out there too, that some of what we're discussing might sound a little woo-woo, but there's actually empiric evidence research behind it, and it has been studied and proven. So
yes.
Dr. David Hawkins is a fantastic example. There's another book that's actually by him also called Why Woo-Woo Works. I love that book because it goes through several different things that are considered woo-woo. But again, he goes through the empiric evidence that we have. And, so there is a reason these metaphysical things work.
Love it. I'm going to write that down myself. I've not read that one.
Yeah. Okay, great. I love this conversation. It's fantastic. So I guess maybe this has already been answered, but I'd really like to hear more about it from you. Like, do we need to know the exact reason in order to heal?
Good question. So I would say yes, because let's say it is a traumatic event in our lives. We don't need to go and relive the trauma. But it would be good to know if that energy, remember we are energy beings, we are electromagnetic energy beings, that trauma has left an energetic bundle of energy in the body. We don't need to go and talk about that event. We don't need to relive it. There's a term in neuroscience that says nerve cells that fire together wire together. In other words, if we keep on talking about the same event over and over and over again, it gives more and more energy to the very thing you don't want to give energy to. And that becomes more of a problem in the body and for our mind, for our emotions. We want to get rid of that energy. One of Dr. Joe Dispenza's sayings is, a memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. It's not going to have that same effect on the body's health once it's been transmuted. So coming back to your question, do we need to know? I think we need to know, yes, because it's getting to the actual cause. There's lots of things that we could do which would say mitigate symptoms. So for example, diet. A lot of people can just go on an anti-inflammatory diet and for the most part, they'll be fine. So is it necessary to go any further? I think so, because wouldn't it be great to be able to eat more things and have a stronger immune system and have a stronger gut and have more options? Because really underneath the inflammation in the gut is the cause. Some people can be, let's give it two extreme examples. Someone who's chronically stressed, not moving, eating shit food, and just sitting in an office all day under fake light. There's lots of things going on at the same time that's going to cause that person, and highly stressed. Yeah, I've already said highly stressed. Lots of things are going to go on at the same time, causing that person to be immunocompromised. Another opposite end of the scale, you got a Zen master who's just chilled the whole time. And if a Zen master, well, let's go back to the first example. If that person in the office who's sedentary and is stressed eats bad food, then the bad food is going to have more of an effect than the Zen master. There's argument to say that the Zen master, you don't have to become a monk and sit on top of a mountain for 20 years. You can just get better at managing thoughts and emotions. The more Zen we are, the more calm we are, the more we're able to eat the things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to eat if we're chronically stressed, because the stress is what weakens the gut, which makes us more susceptible to those food types. For example, Dr. Joe Dispenza at his advanced retreat, he mocks the whole gluten-free movement. He mocks it all. He's like, yeah, you're gluten-free. He's Italian. He loves his gluten. So I mean, I think he respects his body. But the point he's making is, if you are immersing yourself into this field of intelligence, into the quantum, and you're super zen, but it's a work in progress always for me and all of us. The more that we're in that state of mind of calm and tranquil and peace and, zen, ultimately, the more adapting our body is, the more permitting it is to these different food types.
Yeah. So I think, and this is taking us perfectly into one of your other of the 4 pillars, the mental and emotional, because, and you brought up the example of the Buddhist monk. And really, like, when we think about a monk and we talk about even the word Zen, what is that? That's like non-reactive. That's an observer. That's someone that's, like, so I think the important thing to take away from this is that it's a practice, and that we can do this through not only meditation, but awareness, just slowing down to be aware of ourselves. How are we reacting? What are those thoughts that we're thinking as we're, having those reactions? Or maybe we're just observing other people, and, like, just even that awareness and like reflecting that back on ourselves. And I think this is really important because when, what happens physiologically in our body when we react, when we're stressed, that's what creates the inflammation, right?
Completely.
And you mentioned earlier, like, you like to keep it simple. I agree. But I also like to at least give, those of our listeners out there that might not be scientists themselves, at least an awareness of that connection. That when we are stressed, we're anxious, depressed, sad, any of those things, it raises certain chemicals in our body, usually epinephrine or norepinephrine, those fight or flight chemicals. That raises cortisol. Cortisol is part of our stress response. And if it's constantly elevated, then the inflammation is happening. It's normal for us to have a little bit of a bump, and that's fine. But when you're constantly up on that level, then that's when it becomes damaging. So the trick is, how do we live in this world and witness some of the things that we witness without internalizing it, without holding on to it, without then, again, like having that constant reactivity replaying in our heads, right? Because I think that's what causes the chronic stress. We talk about all these chronic conditions, but chronic stress, I think, is one of probably the most prevalent that we can all relate to.
Yeah, 100%. Everything you just said, I totally agree with. It's often spoken about how most chronic illness, 90% of chronic illness is down to chronic stress. So then we say, okay, what is chronic stress? And this also ties back to your question, is it necessary to get to the cause? I think it is, because what makes us stressed ultimately? Because what is stress? Stress is our perception. In other words, it's our internal response to our external environment or external strains. I came across that definition. I think it was in a book, Flow Living at the Peak of Your Abilities by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And it just really resonated, because we just say, I'm stressed, but this person's stressing me out, or I'm stressed. People overuse this word. What is it? Because that's what I really help people with the emotional part, because if we're not careful, we just start using that word and it gets us out of everything, like without ever taking any what's the best way of saying it? I wanted to use that word but not want to use it because it might deter people, but that's the word I wanted to use. Responsibility. What is the stress? So it's our reaction to our external environment. Let's say, I always use the traffic jam example. So 2 people can be in traffic, or they can be driving to work, and then they're met with an unexpected event called a traffic jam. And suddenly they're late, and 2 people can be in a completely different response. One person can call ahead, call the boss, say they're going to be late, traffic, and then just chill out, listen to some music or a podcast, your podcast, Vitality Secret podcast, whichever one, and just relax in that experience. And their body remains healthy, strong, resilient. The immune system's fine. They're not living by the hormones of stress. Compare that with someone else who is in exactly the same external circumstance. They're late for work and they start what we would know as stressing. And they start weaving in and out of traffic. They start swearing and causing road rage and effing and blinding and swearing. And you can virtually see the veins popping out of their foreheads and their necks. And you know what's happening to their blood pressure. And by the way, I'm guilty of this 20 years ago. I used to just get angry with terrible drivers.
Yeah, me too.
Now I'm in Mexico and everyone drives 50% of the speed limit, and it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna chill now. So the point is, two people can have a completely different reaction to exactly the same circumstance. So what is it that's making one person chilled and the other one reactive to that experience? And then it helps to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and find out what the underlying cause of the trauma is. What is the trauma that's causing someone to be so reactive? PTSD is something that causes someone to be very reactive. And of course, like you said, there's big T, little t. Some people have been through some of the most horrific things in their lives. And, 20 years later, they find themselves to be very reactive. So while we need to be mindful and loving to ourselves to absolutely acknowledge what is not okay to have happened, it really helps at some stage to transmute that energy. Because if that energy stays in the body, it literally can get stored in organs that can lead to dis-ease, as well as making us reactive to our everyday environment. And it might be like you used the example earlier, when you're a sibling, 5 years old, it could be something like that. And for other people, I've spoken to a number of women who have had some horrific things happen to them, and there's absolutely nothing okay with that. And I encourage always for them to do the trauma release and but I use the word trapped emotion more, because it's just thinking of it as energy and reminding them they don't have to go and relive it. That doesn't have to happen. And also there's the emotional intelligence side of things. I've attended Tony Robbins events, and without doing the trauma release, I have witnessed women reframe their events without doing the energy stuff, but literally just find new meaning for their events. And witnessing them made me think, oh my goodness, I've got nothing to complain about here. But of course, all of our traumas have different meanings for all of us. So I have seen firsthand young women reframe what has happened to them and create new meaning. And there's a whole process to go through this, but it's very, very empowering. And it's extraordinary seeing transformations like that. And there's a lot of techniques that we aren't. One last thing I was just going to say, there's a lot of techniques that we're not faced with or not presented with in our mainstream way of doing things. Some of the therapists and some psychologists won't have received that kind of training. And just attending a Tony Robbins event, just one example of a number of transformational programs I attended, which just are not mainstream, but they're so powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Oh, for sure. No apologies necessary. Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, like, processing, just finding a way to process, not relive, but process, and allow those emotions, just at least allowing the emotions to move through you. And I also have been to Joe Dispenza retreat, and some of those powerful experiences are, I think it gives people that chance to give themselves the permission to finally feel the emotion, and allow it to move through them. And once it's moved through you, then it's gone. And I think then it does allow you to see it in a different perspective, in a different light, and maybe see what you gained from it, what you learned, how it maybe, even though it was horrible and horrific, maybe it made you a stronger person, a more resilient person, all the things. And so, definitely, like, gentle with yourself, no judgment, but also just allow yourself that space to feel the emotion, feel like, tune in. Where is it in your body? What does it feel like in your body? Does it have a texture? Does it have a weight? Does it have a color? Does it, like all of these, somatic things that,
Exactly.
can be super powerful. And because it at least brings you in, it not only brings your attention to the emotion, but it also brings you into your body. And there's so many ways that we're disconnected from our body these days. And so I'm a big fan of anything that brings you back into your body: breath work, yoga, exercise, but just even attention, self-reflection can bring you back into your body. And it can be so powerful and so healing.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned breath work. I've been leading breath work for the last couple of years, and it's very, very powerful for people.
Oh yeah, when you were telling the story about the traffic jam, my thought was, and I bet they're not even breathing. I bet they're holding their breath.
Yeah, shallow breathing. Exactly. Fight or flight. Yeah. I love everything you just said about processing the emotion. It's very common to want to avoid the emotion. So distraction is most common, whether it's TV or alcohol or smoking or drug, whatever. It's normal that we'd want to just distract ourselves. From a transmutation of the energy perspective, I like to kind of use the surfing analogy. Once I'm a kite surfer, but someone gave me this surfing analogy when I was coaching him actually as a surfer, and I was helping him kind of connect the processing of emotions with surfing and riding the waves. At different stage of the waves or at different stages of the processing of the emotion, if we can allow ourselves to experience the emotion, ride it out, let it be. We are emotional beings. We can't just ignore them. We can't suppress them. We can't just pretend nothing ever happened. We need to ride the wave of the emotion and sit with it. And like you're saying, experience what's coming up in the body. And one of a recent teaching I heard was actually going more esoteric, but she was channeling, and she said for her the best way to process any emotion is to sit with it in silence and really feel it in the body, because once you feel it and you're feeling it and you're feeling it and you're feeling it, you can then let it go. It gets naturally transmuted out of the body. And just calm breathing can help with that as well. There's also other forms of breath work which is more kind of intense, and they cause shaking in the legs, and that's one of my favorite ways to do trauma release, as well as plant medicines and such like. So there's many ways to skin a cat, as horrendous as that saying is, but it's
yeah, I mean, and that's what's so wonderful about so many of us that are teachers and facilitators, is that the way that something's approached either will resonate with someone or it won't. And there's sort of like I guess another way would be like the Baskin Robbins, the 31 flavors. There's a flavor out there for everyone.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly.
I went through a period of time where I was doing EMDR therapy, which is a type of trauma processing therapy. But also too, I really enjoy the somatic way of just tuning in and letting your body vibrate and tell you what's, where it wants your attention to go, and what is going to come up with that. And, and for me, I pair that with more spiritual work and more of that energy work of clearing with light and love. And I work with the angelic realm. So that's one of the ways I do this with my clients. But, there's multiple ways. And if the point is that if you resonate with it and it's effective for you, then do it that way. And don't be afraid to explore new ways and try new things and see, you never know you'll have your mind blown again, like a Joe Dispenza event or a Tony Robbins event, or, any of these teachers out there, because we're all trying to help all of us feel better, to be more productive, to be healthier, to thrive more on a daily basis. And so there's lots of tools, and I encourage all of you to find what works for you and do more of that.
Yeah, totally. totally
So tell
agree.
us where people can find you.
Yeah, so my website is vitalitysecret.com. It's a secret without the S, it's singular, vitalitysecret.com. And they can access my book at vitalitysecret/book or vitalitysecret.com/book. And there's also opportunity for an online program and to hire me as a coach consultant, all on the website, and book a discovery call there.
Fantastic. And your book is on Amazon also, yes?
It is also on Amazon. The 2016 version is on Amazon, and the latest one is coming out, I think, within 2 months.
Okay.
It's going to be called the Vitality Code, and that's the 4 pillars. So the 2016 version is really talking about inflammation, what it is, and how to reverse it, predominantly from a dietary perspective. Also in exercise and managing stress, grounding, all those things.
Fantastic. Anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to bring up before we conclude?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously so much to the healing journey. What I'd just love to say is I feel like there's a reward at the end of the journey, which is not the end. It's like further down the way. And one of my friends in my breathing group I've been leading for a few years, after one session, he said, vanity is the gateway to consciousness. And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, okay. And I kind of agreed. And then I thought, I've got a better one, which I put in my book. I see sickness as the gateway to consciousness. When I say consciousness, it's like discovering like a whole new way of life compared with the mainstream. The wake-up call it can be an incredible awakening where we discover so much magic that is available to us that we have had no experience with before because of various reasons we don't need to go into. But there's so much the other end of the tunnel, if you like. And all I would encourage is, just like you were saying, dive into it, find what works for you and enjoy it. It doesn't have to be a painful process. It can be really quite enjoyable. The vitality journey, as I call it, it can be really enjoyable. And most people I've interviewed who have reversed so-called incurable illnesses have come out the other side being grateful for the illness because it gave them a new doorway into a whole new way of living, where we experience ourselves as energy beings in these physical bodies, where we understand we're connected, where we can understand we can manifest with energy, we can heal ourselves with energy. It's so much. I'm getting goosebumps as I was saying this. That's how I'd like to end. It gets to be fun and exciting.
It really does. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was a pleasure. This was a fantastic conversation. I definitely love to have you back on to talk about your new book, or even just talk more about all of these things that we, and some of them we like barely scratched the surface on. So
I'd love that.
Yeah.
It's been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you, Lara.
You're so welcome. Okay, everyone, definitely go to Neil's website, vitalitysecret.com. Check out his book at vitalitysecret.com/book. Keep your eyes and ears open for his new book release. And if you were intrigued by this conversation and want to work with him, that's vitalitysecret.com/coaching. So, and we will catch you on the flip side, everybody. Bye.